to order this meeting of Regional School District 12 Annual District Meeting, or the district annual meeting at 7:01 p.m. At this point, I'd like to entertain nominations of a moderator to conduct the meeting. I would entertain a nomination. Mr. Parachi would be a good suggestion. But
Nominate.
okay. Okay, second.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Are there any further nominations? Do we have a motion the nominations be closed?
I so move.
Is there a second? We'll vote on the motion, close nominations, not on the motion of the moderator, but to close nominations. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. All those abstaining, please so abstain. Okay, we will now take a vote to elect the moderator to the meeting. Mr. Parachi has been nominated. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, say nay. All those abstaining, so indicate. No. At this point in time, I will ask the moderator to come forward and moderate. Yes, read the notice. To start.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you. This is a notice of annual district budget meeting, Chippewa Valley Regional School District 12. Notice is hereby given to all those entitled to vote in town meetings in the towns of Bridgewater, Roxbury, and Washington that a district meeting will be held on Monday, May 6th, 2024 at 7:00 p.m. at Chippewa Valley School, 159 South Street, Washington, Connecticut, to present for approval the annual budget for the year 2024-2025, prepared by the Regional Board of Education for Chippewa Valley Regional School District 12, copies of which are on file with the respective town clerks of the district and at the central office of the Board of Education. Chippewa Valley Regional School District 12, Bridgewater, Roxbury, Washington, by Gregory Cava, Chairman, Board of Education, Washington Depot, Connecticut, 06793.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Well, the next item on the agenda is a presentation of a budget in the amount of $25,957,722 in accordance with General Statute 10-51. I'll ask the superintendent and the director of finance if you plan to do any presentation, or are you going to stand on the budget that's previously been presented?
Going to stand on the budget that was previously presented.
You have made no change.
No.
All right, well, that budget will be, if no one objects, we will spread that upon the minutes of the meeting. And that budget will be attached and be part of this as been presented. At this point in time, if there's no objection, I'll accept a motion for adjournment. And this adjournment would be until tomorrow, Tuesday, May 7, 2024, until the polls open in each of the 3 member towns for the purpose of voting the question. The meeting shall then be considered as adjourned following the close of the polls in the 3 member towns and announcements made of the results of the voting question. The 3 towns, Bridgewater, Town Clerk Cheryl Pinkos, 860-354-5102. That voting is at the Senior Center, 132 Chestnut Hill Road, from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Roxbury Town Clerk Peter Hurlbut, 860-354-3328. And that voting is at Roxbury Town Hall, 29 North Street, from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Washington Town Clerk Sheila Anson, 860-868-2786. And that balloting will be conducted at the Town Hall, Bryan Memorial Plaza in Washington from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. Is there a motion to adjourn, subject to adjourning to tomorrow as I've set forth?
So move.
Is there a second? All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? All those abstaining? This meeting is adjourned to the vote tomorrow. And now I will call to order this meeting of the Regional School District 12 Board of Education. And I'll ask our secretary to determine a quorum.
All right. Joe Abdallah. Greg Cava.
Here?
Victoria Salem. I'm here. Stephanie Kolnick, Angela Macchiarulo, Alex McNaughton,
Here.
Dustin Ongley.
Here.
Jennifer Cody, James Sargent, Not here. She's not online. Pete Tagley, Mary Weber. Okay, we've got quorum.
Okay, we have a quorum and it's with 10 votes. Present. Okay, at this point in time, I'd like to invite any public comment on matters on tonight's agenda. Is there any comment from the public on matters on tonight's agenda? I hear and see no one standing and indicating they'd like to comment, so we will move on. And we will start with the next item, which is the Development Relationship Survey results for the Bridgewater Roxbury Washington Convention Council.
Can I make a comment on this? When you print those out, because it's a dark background, my printer prints out everything except for the white. In the future, could it maybe be the other way around? Because it uses up all the ink just to print the sheets. Okay, thank you.
It's gonna be natural. You'll be able to tell when it's time for me to move. All right, yeah, or I'll give you a look. So I just want to take a moment and say thank you to the board. I think the last time I stood before you was a little over 4 years ago, right before COVID. Asking for your good grace and will to have this survey implemented or a similar survey implemented in our district. And then COVID happened, right? So we're here. It's great. I'm very excited we're able to do this. My name is Emma Johnson Hollis. I am first and foremost a parent of a few students here at Chappaq. I'm also behavioral health director with Western Connecticut Coalition. We are your regional behavioral health action organization for the western part of the state. So I'm not really hope that this is going to be not just me talking for the next 15 minutes or so. So if you have thoughts, comments, questions, please don't be afraid to jump in and ask. So I'm not going to read these out to you. You could take a moment and consider it if you'd like. For the academics in here, I will just say that it is very important for the development of our children on many different ways, but specifically through behavioral health and mental wellness, that we have strong developmental relationships. And you know, I think we're in an okay spot, and there's going to be areas for improvement and areas for celebration. Go ahead. So you have a handout that goes through the 5 elements of developmental relationships. Hopefully you took a minute to read through that. If not, I invite you to take a moment and read through it. It will seem fairly intuitive to you. While you peruse that, I'm going to start with saying, this is where we're at with a big picture, right? So this is big picture, bird's eye view. We score as a school system fairly moderate for our developmental relationships. I would say for the first implementation of this sort of survey, that's a pretty good place to be. Almost 30% of our youth are reporting that they have strong relationships within the school. So I just want to acknowledge here that all of these relationships we're describing is school-based relationships. So that is staff, faculty, support, you know, coaches, anybody who is involved with Chappaq. So here are the 5 elements of developmental relationship. I'm going to take a second, let you reflect on what these say. And I'd like to know from you, where do you think we score the highest out of these elements? Does anyone want to take a guess? Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. One more, anybody?
Challenge growth.
Yes, definitely challenge growth. So that is what we are seeing with our students the most. And like I had one more slide. Yeah, 43% of our students are sharing that they experience moderate or strong occurrences of challenge growth. And again, I'm not going to read that definition for you. You have it in your handouts. But it's something to consider going through this survey together tonight, as well as your relationships with our students moving forward. I think about the students that have graduated here and gone on to fairly successful lives. And I would say that, yeah, as a community, we definitely challenge growth within our youth. So on the other end of things, we do have some areas of improvement. 13% of our students report they have strong experiences in expanded possibilities. So that's 13%. And 26% report strong experiences in expressed care from the adults in the school. Go ahead.
Can I just ask one quick question before we get too far into it? Do you have a number of, or a percentage of completion that we got from the student body? It was six through 12?
6 through 12. And I think, Mike, if I'm not mistaken, it was about 400 students that completed.
That's pretty close, right?
It's a,
We have-
definitely, it's more than a representative sample.
Got it. Thanks.
So go to the next slide. What does this mean? What is express care and expand possibilities? Just want you guys to take a moment and think about how you have experienced or engaged in these two key elements with your relationships. So whether that's with your own family members, students within the district, people that you care about, or even in your own life, how have you experienced expanded possibilities and expressed care? Something to sit with. So what does it mean? What does it mean to express care? To be encouraging, dependable, listen, to believe in me and our students, to be warm, approachable, all of those soft skills. And then on the other end of things, you know, we really encourage our students to grow and to become successful and resilient and brilliant young people. But how are we expanding those possibilities? Do we inspire our youth? Are we connecting them to possibilities outside of our school district? Do we broaden their horizons in one way or another? And I want to acknowledge that this is not a riddle for the board to solve, right? This is a community issue. We know that community approaches to bolstering these relationships is really what's going to promote resiliency within our youth. All right, so here's the not good stuff. This is the area of greatest concern. 23% of our students are reporting experiences of bias or discrimination from peers and or adults. I'll let you take a moment and read the caveat under here. And I'm also going to say I'm fairly proud of these students for answering to the best of their ability and honestly. Alex, what a great question. And we're going to get to it. Thank you. No, it's great. I love that. I love when people move me along in my presentations. Go ahead. So who is experiencing this or from whom? The majority of our students are saying that peers are the ones who are engaging in discrimination, bias or bullying. 24% are reporting from staff and or from both and 5% from staff specifically. And then you can see in this beautiful pie chart that I made in Canva earlier this week, the why. What is that? What does it look like? Some of our students, 13%, say it's because of their ethnicity. 16% are saying it's age related. 19 are reporting that it's sexual orientation related. 24 is gender specific. And here's the challenge. 28% of this population that reported experiencing discrimination or bias said it wasn't any of these categories. Right? That's our challenge. That is a part of our riddle that we need to solve. Okay. So the recommendation from the Profession Council just at the start, right? So this is basically just a taste test of what we're experiencing through our data. And we will be developing more of a longitudinal plan to address a lot of this. But first, we really would like to take a moment and create some focus groups with our students to understand, what does this mean? What does the discrimination and bias mean when it's categorized as other or something else? We also want to gain insights from the community and from the people within these walls to really consider how we want to fortify these relationships, reduce experiences of bias and discrimination so that our students can still foster strength and growth and resiliency. Let's balance that out with some fun. Let's celebrate. Our students report at 81%, they had stronger experiences with social and emotional competence. Does anybody in here remember the year that we started really addressing SEL? For those of you that have been on the board for a long time. Not sure. Well, I can tell you that my oldest is 17. And when he was in Washington Primary School, he had second step, right? So that's a good amount of time. We're seeing some return on that investment. 81% of our students are saying that they're experiencing social and emotional competence. This was greater than what most students report in other sample studies. So that's a great benchmark for us to be at. Balancing that back out with some areas of growth, our students are aware that they still have some relationship skills building to do. They are aware. Okay, I just want to take a moment to say that I have a 13-year-old and a 17-year-old, and for anybody who's experienced that, which I'm sure most of you have had experienced, to have students say that they're aware that they're not there yet is pretty fantastic. So we're in an okay spot and there's room for growth. So that might be hard to read. Lastly, I want to take a moment and consider the substance misuse. As you know, we are the Prevention Council for Chappaqua Region 12. So predominantly, we are concerned with reducing substance use within our youth, but we know that doing that is through developing strong relationships, developing strong mental health responses, and developing strategies, okay? So when we're looking at this sample of students, we're finding that 10% of them, roughly 10%, report using alcohol within the past month. As you may suspect, it grows through the classes with the highest rate with the senior population. With our tobacco use, it's pretty small. I would expect that. Our cannabis use is at 5%. I think this is going to be an interesting one for us to consider and to keep an eye on over the next few years. Lastly, vaping, nicotine and or cannabis is at 5%. So a lot of what we do has been focused around education with vaping. 5% of this total sample size is great. I hope one day we get to 0 or close to that. Or at least over the next few years, stay at a stable 5% while we address what's happening within our school system. So we're not going to take up all of your time here. I do want to know what your key takeaways are. I also want to invite my friends on the council if they want to share any of their thoughts. What are your key takeaways?
Well, I have a question on the last slide. Do we have anything that takes this back a number of years so we could see whether what trends are or what, where these numbers are in context?
I wish. This is the first survey that we've done.
Oh, okay.
So this is base level. We can compare it to what's happening regionally. And we could even break it down to what's happening with fairly comparable schools to get a good idea. I would say that 5% that are engaging in vaping, nicotine and or cannabis is fairly low for this. But there is still areas of growth. I mean, alcohol use is still the #1 misused substance across the lifespan.
Thank you.
Did we have any students that didn't want to take the survey? Great. There we go. What do you plan on doing with all this information?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, in the short term, we definitely want to conduct a few focus studies with our students to get some of that process data. That's going to really help us inform what we're doing next. So for those of you that may live by the fiscal year, the Prevention Council's grant is coming to a close, which means they'll be applying for the next year of funding. So we're going to use a lot of this information to inform what the year is going to look like moving ahead. What that looks like at this point, I'm not sure. I don't know. We're very excited that we have a starting point. You guys could, yeah, go ahead.
First, I want to say thank you for your presentation and also thanks to the council for your persistence in making sure that we followed up and got the survey done 4 years later. I think there's a lot of really useful and timely information. We had a discussion earlier this year about follow-up to the ADL presentation, and some of these things we heard about, bias being reported, and I think it is a great baseline. I think it's great to get follow-up from community members and family members, and did this survey include staff members as well, or just students? I'd be interested to know how staff members perceive, what's happening, or, how they feel like, meaningful ways that we can contribute towards some of our areas of concern or areas of improvement. So I look forward to seeing what the follow-up is for this and how, the grants can support the good work that you're all doing. And certainly if there are ways that coalesce with the board, to come back and let us know.
So the 28% of the other is sort of a concern for me, because when you look at your beautiful pie from Canva, and you see that the bias of being, your sexual orientation, gender, et cetera. So that other being the larger percentage. How do you, and I understand you're using focus groups to dig a little deeper, but how do you, that part actually makes me a little nervous. Because what does that mean in terms of what are the other options of why somebody feels like they're not being accepted or included or whatever that may be? So how do you do that? How do you figure that part out? No pressure.
No pressure. Thanks, Jen.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, that's with some good partnership within the administration. And I would also say some good partnership with the counseling department.
Yeah.
We wouldn't want to do anything that is misinformed and potentially putting our staff and students at further harm.
Yeah.
Because I was just discussing with Justin a second ago, we were asking the same question. Just throwing this out there as maybe a possibility or an avenue to explore. Could it potentially even be along like political lines? Could it be like political identity or something? Are those discussions happening more in the classroom? And maybe, some students are feeling singled out in one way or the other. I don't know, just throwing out an idea.
Could be, it could be. And the other thing I considered, of course, is socioeconomic status. We have a very wide range here, as you know, across the 3 towns. That is not something that was uncovered within this data set. So I'm curious about that.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. And I wanted to add that we're planning to do a climate survey this year. I'm sure you've heard about that. We haven't done that here in a few years either. And that does get to all parents, all students, and all staff. And a lot of the data sets that you have, I think would be a nice pair with that, because it does talk about, a lot of it is about building those relationships, students to staff. And how parents perceive that, how students perceive that, and their perception of staff as well. So I think I'd love to see how that correlates. And then, of course, there's always that question of what do we do with that information? And ours will break it down, by gender, by grade. And I think from that point, we have advisory periods and morning meetings and venues that we could actually utilize with the appropriate activities and have that dialogue with students at all the time, not just every now and then, but more frequently.
I'm glad that you just said that, because way back when, a long, long time ago, when I was in high school, I heard a lot going on around me. This one says I'm overweight. This one says I'm too thin. And I came from a very affluent community in Westchester, New York. This one has so much money, but this one has no money and feels horrible. So I implemented a program in my high school where we sent out a survey to parents, to siblings, older siblings that had left the school system, to the students themselves, and to the staff. And we found out that there were so many different things, issues, and the counseling department had, back in elementary school, they do the lunch bunch. Well, we used to have groups within the high school to focus on certain things and how we can help change that and how we can help the students feel better. And it was huge. And it was throughout my whole 4 years of high school. And in the end, it was just, we made such an impact by doing those surveys, not just with the students, but with the family members and even extended family, aunts, uncles. Hey, have you heard your student, your family member talk about something? Yes, as a matter of fact, it was confided in me that he is being bullied because he's overweight, or she's being bullied because she's too thin, or because we don't have any money. And that really, really helped us. So those surveys are going to be key. Absolutely key.
Well, here's the question. When's the next one?
So we've discussed doing it every year and every other year. But I don't think we landed on a choice yet. I've done this in quite a few districts, and we've generally gone every other year to follow a certain. I'll throw it out to the board if you have thoughts and opinions about that.
Well, I think you should use your judgment as to how frequently you do it, because you can wear people out by doing it too frequently. And also you could get information that doesn't differentiate very much.
Yeah.
And then the question is, well, what does it mean that we're off by 0.8% or whatever on something? It could just be random reasons. So yeah, I think you have to figure that out. I think also you'll have to figure out how to sharpen some of your questions in order to get down to things like this 28, another reason 28%. How do you figure that out? What kind of questions would you ask to probe at that? And that may take you some time to figure that out. And I don't know whether there's any other information you need as an interim step before your next survey. So it's like, this is a hard thing.
Sure.
Really commend you for doing such a great job with this. A great report. It really gives us a lot of information that I think we can chew on, and we can watch as you continue to develop it.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you all so much. Really appreciate it. Great job. Okay. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda. The consent agenda. There's minutes from the Board of Ed meeting of March 18th and the meeting of April 8th. Does anyone wish to take either of those off of the consent agenda for examination, modification, discussion, or anything else? Hearing none, those will be adopted. Reports and recognition, board chairs report. I want to say that I'm making an appointment and I have appointed the Agri-Science Committee of the board. And I've appointed to that committee Mary Weber, Jane Sargent, and Victoria Salem. And good luck, guys. I would imagine you'll want to get together. You'll want to figure out when your first meeting is, and you'll want to also have some liaison with the Agri-Science Advisory Committee, so that you can meet with them as well as part of this process. So I'll look forward to hearing from that and how you're doing on it. Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate your willingness to serve. And it's always easy when Jane doesn't come, I can appoint her to anything. No, seriously, Jane had a strong interest in it, so I think that'll be good. Okay, excellent. Superintendent's report.
First, I wanted to share with the community that I had the opportunity to celebrate elementary, middle, and high school students at the annual CAP Superintendent Student Recognition at the Danville Villa last Thursday. The families and students were so appreciative, and it was a wonderful evening to celebrate our kids, and they will also be honored, just so you know, at an upcoming board meeting on May 20th. Along with all of our other student recognition and achievement awards that same evening. Moving ahead, Carrie Snowden and I are preparing for our presentations to the community as an introduction to her role as the new Director of Teaching, Learning, and Assessment, but also to outline the goals and the commitments in our Region 12 strategic plan and specifically related to powerful learning and enrichment opportunities that we offer our students. And these, we decided that these meetings would be best served on Zoom. And that would help maybe attract more families that can participate. So we have Wednesday, May 8th at Booth, 6:30. Wednesday, May 15th at Burnham, and that's at 6 p.m. And Chippewa then followed that same evening at 7:15. And then finally, Tuesday, June 4th at Washington Primary at 6:30. So we're really excited about that and talking about our goals for next year, Carrie's goals too. And hopefully you've all already received, I think, a copy of the spring publication in the mail, which also went out to all of the community households, and a copy of this year we put in every staff member's mailbox. The theme was powerful learning, and I want to thank all of the staff and administrators who actually contributed articles and highlighted the real positive academic experiences that we currently provide our students here in the region, but also some initiatives and things we're looking to provide in the future. And that hopefully will sharpen our students' understanding of critical concepts and skills across all subject areas. I also think it makes a great conversation piece and a really nice marketing tool for our district. We also sent it to all the local realtors and to every town hall in all 3 towns. So I hope you really take a look at it. There's some really wonderful articles, and I'm really proud of, and thank you, Ben Allen, for your wonderful design and really help shaping this publication. It really came out beautiful. So thank you. Okay, so we have some in personnel, some resignations. We have Adriana Bertola, world language teacher, who's resigned effective June 14th. And Margaret Groot, who is our current agri-science teacher at Chippewa, resigned effective June 14th. We also have some retirements. Jane Manley, art teacher at all the elementary schools, and that's effective June 30th. And Mary Ann Russell, elementary teacher at Booth Free School. And just so you know, I asked if we had ever brought forward all the retirees to one of the board meetings to recognize, and I don't think we have, but I'm used to doing that, so I would like to propose that we do that. And I think we're doing it one of the last nights. I think it's I think we chose the June 3rd, which will be really nice. And, you know, just say a few words about them, and you can certainly add any commentary to that. They would appreciate it very much. And then finally, a field trip, just a notification, grade 5, all the 3 elementary schools will be visiting Sturbridge Village in Sturbridge, Massachusetts on May 31st. There are 35 students participating. And the trip is a culmination of the study of Connecticut's early history during the colonial period. Obviously, as you know, Sturbridge is a field trip that's kind of favorite among not just Region 12, but lots of schools. And students really get a chance to kind of go back in time as the staff there provide, I think, authentic instruction through history, talks, and period. They're in the period attire and activities, and the ambiance is just really something special. Kids love it. So, and that's all I have this evening.
Well, that Sturbridge trip is a great trip. I had the pleasure of going one year to help out, and it was kids had a marvelous time. It's a great facility. Okay. Treasurer's report, Alex.
I don't have anything unless Nicole, is there something I should be bringing up? Yeah. And also, when it comes to F&O, we have not had a meeting since our last board meeting, so I won't have anything for that either.
Okay. Curriculum and educational programming, Justin. you had-
So we just had a meeting an hour or so ago and Carrie Snowden walked us through the K through 12 Learning, Teaching and Learning Council, which is going to be a district-wide committee with basically the goal is for teachers to have some sort of say in enacting parts of the district's strategic plan. And she's looking for a broad representation, each, teachers from K through 5 schools, different content area, agri-science, special education, administration, all of that fun stuff. So K through 12. Yeah, thank you. And basically another thing that they're going to be looking at is the Atlas curriculum, looking at the accuracy, are we doing what we say we are doing? Is there an area to improve upon? Another idea that we talked about was the idea of concept-based curriculum, which would be taking some of the skills or knowledge that you might learn in one class. The example was 1812, the war. Yeah, let's go with that. So, the War of 1812, how does that fit? How can you take what you learn from that incident in American history and then apply that to something that happened 100 years later? So it's one of the goals is looking for patterns within subjects, which will help students to transfer or knowledge from one area to another area. Then we also briefly talked about Linkit, right? Which is a data warehouse. Just kind of briefly touched on some of the reports that, could be run on student information to make decisions across curriculum. And our next meeting is going to be in June, where we meet with the people from Ed Advance who reported to us last meeting. So we're looking forward to that as well, the career stuff.
Great. Thank you very much. Ed Advance, Joe.
I attended the latest in-person Ed Advance Board of Directors meeting this past Thursday, which was May 2nd. During this meeting, our board approved the COLA increase for the staff beginning in the next year, which is 24-25. Also, the proposed agency budget for 24-25 was approved, as well as our slate of officers, with only one change in the vice president position. On a side note, this was also Jeff Kitching's final in-person meeting for his career. We have one more meeting in June, which will be his final meeting, and then John Costa will be taking over for them.
Thanks, Joe. Well, we can pass F&O, and so we'll go on to policy. We have 4 items on the agenda tonight for policy, so that's where that stands. Negotiations committee, we have 3 upcoming sessions. On the 7th at 5 p.m., we are meeting with the representatives of the nurses union. On 5/9, Thursday the 9th, we're meeting with paraprofessionals at 4 o'clock and custodians at 5. So this is the start of the 3 contracts that we're working on. And so that's what's going on in negotiations. Strategic long-range planning, Jen.
Nothing to report. We have a meeting. Monday.
At 6, right?
That's it.
All right, well, we'll move on to, we have no old business, so we'll move on to new business. And the first item, to consider and if appropriate, pursuant to General Statute 10-215F, the Board of Education certifies that all food items offered for sale to students in the schools under its jurisdiction and not exempted from the Connecticut Nutrition Standards published by the Connecticut State Department of Education will comply with the Connecticut Nutrition Standards during the period of July 1, 2024 through June 30 of 2025. This certification shall include all food offered for sale to students separately from reimbursable meals at all times and from all sources, including but not limited to school stores, vending machines, school cafeterias, culinary programs, and any fundraising activities on school premises sponsored by the school or non-school organizations and groups. Nicole.
This is the annual healthy food certification that we adopt every year. And what it allows us to do is when we're paid reimbursements by the National School Lunch Program for free and reduced meals, it's a higher level of reimbursement because we've agreed to this. It's currently implemented in our buildings right now. And it doesn't, there's not a good argument to not implement it because this is the federal requirement that the state endorses. If we opt out of this federal requirement, then the state has a separate statute that we have to comply with, and that statute is actually more difficult for us to administer. So it doesn't make any sense to continue with the healthy food certification, which is what this is. We have to confirm it annually.
So you're recommending we approve it.
Yes.
Is there a motion to approve it in terms of what's stated here in the agenda? Is there a second? It's moved and seconded. Discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. All those abstaining, please indicate. That's unanimous. The next item is to consider, if appropriate, the Board of Education will allow the sale to students of food items that do not meet the Connecticut nutrition standards and beverages not listed in section 10-221Q of the Connecticut General Statutes, provided the following conditions are met. One, the sale is in connection with an event occurring after the end of the regular school day or on a weekend. Two, the sale is at the location of the event. And three, the food and beverage items are not sold from a vending machine or school store. An event, in quotes, is an occurrence that involves more than just a regularly scheduled practice, meeting, or extracurricular activity. For example, soccer games, school plays, and interscholastic debates are events, but soccer practices, play rehearsals, and debate team meetings are not. The regular school day is the period from midnight before to 30 minutes after the end of the official school day. Location means where the event is being held and must be the same place as the food and beverage sales. Is there a motion to adopt that? Is there a second? Do you have any explanation of this?
Sure. So this allows us to take exception from what we just agreed to for special events. When you are at a basketball game and you see one of our school groups or PTO selling candy bars and cookies, by adopting this motion, that's what allows them to do that, because it does contradict the motion you just approved.
Which they can do at games, but not at practices.
Correct.
Thank you for making that clear. Okay, further discussion. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. All those abstaining, please so indicate. That's unanimous. Okay, next item 3, consider for approval of as a first reading proposed policy 5118.3, non-resident attendance. You should find at your place at least a red line version of this to show what changes we've made to this policy. The first change is on tuition. It previously said that the tuition rate for each non-resident student will be established by the Board of Ed. Rates will be subject to change by action of the Board of Ed. That's been stricken in favor of the superintendent will set tuition annually, subject to the approval of the board. That probably makes more sense for it to be done that way, because the superintendent should come up with working with the director of finance with numbers for tuition, and then the board approves or doesn't approve it. So the board isn't giving up any power here. It's just making it work by having the person who's going to do the work do the work. And also it will be within the strategic idea of what the superintendent is trying to accomplish on behalf of the school district. So this seemed to us to be a sensible change. The next change is tuition payment shall be made, it used to say, in 2 equal installments on or before August 1st and on or before January 2nd. Somehow it seems to be tricky catching that second installment from some people. So now the whole bill is going to be due at the beginning. Because we really don't want to spend time and district money and resources chasing down bills, because the kids don't seem to disappear. It's the money that becomes harder to get. So we think this makes sense for us. So that's what we're going to do. There's a change as to the legal reference. I don't know why that's a change because I don't know what. I mean, it's now Article 10 of the general statutes. It was Article 10 before, it's Article 10 now. I think that's one of these things where the redlining system is out of control. So there you go. Those are the proposed changes. Is there a motion to adopt for a first reading proposed policy 5118.3? Is there a second? Okay, the policy committee recommends the adoption of these changes. I don't know if anyone has any questions, concerns, or
Yeah, I have a question about this. So what happens if, say, the F and O committee doesn't agree with the proposal by, Lori and Nicole?
well, I would imagine you would express that both to them at the discussion stage and to the board if the proposal persisted. And
So the board has to ultimately say yes or no.
yeah, it's a board decision. Now,
Yeah.
the F and O committee frequently, as all the committees do, makes recommendations to the board. So you may say, when this comes up for board consideration, you may say, we don't like it. We're opposed to it. We think we should not make these amounts. We think the amount should be different, or we think it ought to be looked at again. We're not prepared to tell you what we think the number should be. I mean, you may have some response. I would hope that in a perfect world, that discussion would be had before a decision was announced, and there would be internal discussion with the F and O and Director of Finance and the Superintendent to see if we can get everybody's arms around a proposal that comes to the board so that it isn't controversial. But I recognize that sometimes there's just differing opinions. So I think that's probably the way it'll be handled. I've got to say, to be honest, the committee structure of this board is fantastic. It works really well. The people serving on and chairing our committees have done a marvelous job getting things done, and also coming here with expertise so that when issues come up, we trust you. And we feel that you've done your diligence in your job. And I think that's part and parcel of why it works so well. And so I think that's what you have to do. And if there's a problem or a disagreement, I would hash that out heavily in the committee meeting. I mean, that's where the hard work gets done, I think. It should be done. So that would be my recommendation. Any other comments or concerns? Okay. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. All those abstaining. It's unanimous. We'll move on to the next item. Consider for approval as a first reading, proposed policy 5131.81, use of private technological devices by students. This has a few more changes. Most of these changes are just updates, but they're also redefining. I mean, we changed things like used by the school district is now used by the Region 12 schools, the district. So we made the district a defined term. On the privately owned technological devices, the idea was not to eliminate anything in here, but it was to basically loop all of that under personal computing devices rather than list a bunch of things, some of which, may not be entirely accurate and may not be useful anymore. I mean, referring to things like Blackberries is probably a bit anachronistic because I don't think they've been made for a number of years. And so, I think the idea was to try to modernize the terminology. It was also a desire to add a few things in like smartwatches, CD players and tablets, Bluetooth speakers, personal gaming systems. And so the idea was to add some things that had not been in here. Also, was to add generative artificial intelligence. And so a basic definition of that has been put in here. And so AI is now under this policy for the use of private technology devices by students. And most importantly, we're going to be able to, as a matter of policy, at least take an overview of, if not control the use of AI in assignments and how things are done. So far, my understanding is it's pretty easy to tell when something has been written by AI. That may not be the case in 2 or 3 years, but it is now. And so this is something we need to get a handle on to make sure it's not something that's not used in an appropriate way. I mean, this is here to stay. I can tell you that. Every professional organization that I belong to has been talking about almost nothing but AI for the last 2 years or 3 years. And the people who are proponents of it have been trying to assuage everyone's concerns that it's a wonderful thing that's going to do a lot of things that are good. What it's going to do is, I've come to the conclusion after looking at these, it's going to eliminate a lot of positions with companies. I know someone talked about small law firms can now compete with large ones. They have thousands of lawyers because you don't need all these people to review documents and things. You've got AI to do it. So they said, now you'll be able to compete. Well, that sounds like now you'll have a whole bunch of lawyers out of work. So I think that's typical of how it's impacting industries, is it's taking whole groups of people and eliminating. I don't know how that impacts us, but I think our kids need to understand how this is going to happen, if it's going to happen, and they need to understand how it works, but we also need to control how they use it in the schools. It's a complicated thing. So anyway, we've now brought it within the ambit of our policies. So that's a modernization. On the next page, there are more of these district defined terms at the top. We've also added certain kinds of, in the list of things where the purpose is improper and is prohibited, we've added using such privately owned devices to violate a school rule. And using such privately owned device for the unauthorized use of generative artificial intelligence. So we have the ability to stop the use of personal devices for AI. So that's one item that's in here. We've also stricken the word safe school climate plan and instead put student discipline, left in student discipline policy. So I don't really, maybe Lori, you can let us know what that's about, because I wasn't quite sure what that meant.
I'm sure they did it because that you would certainly find that in a student discipline policy rather than a safe school climate plan. Because it says fairly, yeah, it has to do with the resulting consequences because you haven't followed the guidelines, and you would find that more generally in a student discipline policy or a policy that you find in a handbook than a safe school climate plan, which really outlines much broader kinds of things not related to that in terms of discipline. So they probably corrected that because that's not where you would find that.
Well, then safe school climate plan probably would have been a nice buzzword that came out a few years ago when they put that in here because they thought it might contain such things.
They might have, but I think they realized that that's not really, yeah, it doesn't at all connect.
So those are the changes to this policy. I don't know if anyone has any questions or concerns. Yes. Stephanie.
One question and then one kind of statement, I guess. The question is, the policy states that the students can possess privately owned tech devices. Do we have classroom policies that would be different than board policy about whether students can take those out or not? Is that appropriate at a board level, or is that more of like a school or individual classroom?
Well, again, that's why we have that in there where it cannot be used during instructional time except specifically permitted by, and now they've added district or building administration because we wanted to, and again, we're kind of going back and forth about the BYOD, just so you know, because we're giving students devices. So what do we do with them bringing their own in versus we've already said they could have their own up until we started to give devices during COVID, right? So, but what we landed on, at least for now, is most teachers will have them use their devices that we're giving them because we can monitor that. It's much harder to monitor when they're using their own devices. But the policy says we can do that. So if every teacher, every administrator says, you can bring a device because you might use it after school or you might use it, that's fine, but it is not to come out during instruction at all. So we're sort of in between right now discussing that. but we haven't out with the policy.
Got it. So that's
Okay.
why it's at board.
And there might be a time when they say, you know what? Like senior project, we talked about that. There are a lot of things that they can do more aptly on their own devices. So we don't want to totally restrict either. I mean, that's not the way of the world right now, right? But we want to make sure that we're in control of technology in our buildings and across the district.
Well, I'm one of the few people that was actually serving on the board when we adopted the policy to allow personal devices to be brought to school. It was 10 years ago. That's how long ago it
Yeah.
was, believe it or not. And I was an enthusiastic supporter of it. Not sure if some of that enthusiasm hasn't dimmed over the years, because I think these things are a mixed bag. And to some extent, to some extent, when they serve as to facilitate communications between parents and their students, that's a good thing. And that's a safe thing, and we like that. When they facilitate cyberbullying or the use of other nefarious things, they're a problem. When they cause kids to be focused on the screen and the device instead of what's happening in class, that's potentially a bad thing. But I asked the question, well, if you had it to do over again, would you allow these in? Because I would imagine it's going to be hard to get them out. I mean, when parents have just gone and bought their child a $1,500 device, I don't think it's very likely that we're going to say you don't get it. The only way, if you wanted to remove these from the school, would be to say all those students who are in grade 1 or kindergarten cannot bring personal devices for the rest of their tenure in the region. You'd have to start it at a very young age before they've got them. Although for all I know, first graders now have their own devices, and they're smart devices too. There are other school districts have taken these out, and they have limited students to having flip phones on the theory that they can communicate with their parents with a flip phone, but they can't use it as a smartphone, and they can't go online with it. I'm not suggesting we do this. I'm just suggesting that at the time, a couple of board members said, this is a bad idea. We shouldn't do this. Greg, you're out of your mind.
Well,
Maybe.
the second part of what I wanted to say was just to say that I think we should acknowledge just the larger national discussion. I mean, there are articles coming out in the Washington Post. There are best-selling books out there now, and I've had numerous parents come up to me asking what our policies are, and again, just talking about maybe the larger discussion that would be appropriate at another time, or maybe in conjunction with Prevention Council as they're doing surveys, to understand the technological and the personal device impact on mental health. And I know that discussion is coming up, and I don't know if that's necessarily a board decision yet, but it's something that we discuss with families and parents and community members about what they perceive to be important and the impact. I'd like to hear from teachers at some point too. You know, how is this something that's truly impacting daily life, or is it not? Is Shipari doing a great job at handling and managing, and, you know, are our students being responsible with the technology that they're given? But just as we're going through this, I thought it was pretty timely, coincidental that we're talking about the policies, but I'm hearing enough of it out in the community that I think it would be worth taking the temperature at some point to see how community members feel. I mean, a lot of us don't have kids in the district right now, so there's a little degree of separation between how parents feel about the use of not even just personal devices, but the technology that's given by the school to the students and how we're using that in the classroom.
I urge you to make a videotape of what Stephanie just said, because you covered the entire field on what ought to be done. But I think there needs to be a dialogue between teachers and administration and parents on this issue at some point.
I think I was just looking back. I think that's why Safe School Climate was mentioned in tandem with technology way back when, because they were really focused on technology and bullying and those kinds of mental health issues that impact students. And then realize that, well, on the flip side of that, it's out there. Everyone has a device. Schools were opening up opportunities. It's really hard to sort of put the genie back in the bottle in my mind. However, I do believe in balance, and I do believe that we hold students accountable if, you know, they're going to use a device, whether it's their own or ours, or home, because you could be home doing the same things to kids. I hear more of that than not. So we really have to hopefully hold students accountable for what's right and wrong, what's acceptable and not acceptable, whether they use our device or not, and really follow through and have that, again, those same conversations we were just talking about relationships and, how kids feel about each other and how they respect each other and so on and so forth. So it is a much bigger conversation, not just let's get rid of devices.
Right, no,
I think
totally agree.
we're way past that. I really do believe that. I mean, they're already putting AI in here. I will tell you, we have conversations every week as superintendent's group about, the impact of AI that we haven't even really scratched the surface yet. So
Yeah,
I like balance more than anything and rather just have those really good conversations and how do we balance that out so that we are mindful of all of those things you brought up. I think Stephanie were key, and we just have to keep looking at that and working through those things.
it struck me not too long ago, I went to a discussion held for parents of students in the district with special needs. And Ally had, through grant money, gotten a group together from ESS, which is like Effective School Solutions. And the discussion was on, depression or also a second discussion on managing students that have anxiety. And the discussion turned toward every time social media and its impact and, how kids throughout. And I think there are avenues for that, maybe through some of those other groups that have grant money to do forums, maybe for the general ed population and not just, kind of these small groups, but just as an avenue to start there. Again, I didn't want to pull policy too far into it, but just because it touched on the subject, I
Absolutely.
think that's putting the cart
Yes.
before the horse, but definitely understanding what, the community feel is.
It's part of that. It's part of that climate survey too. There's aspects of that throughout. So hopefully we glean some information. And because they'll be able to write into pieces and I'm sure that will come up. I guarantee it comes up with kids and parents and staff. So
I have one question.
Yeah, go ahead.
If a teacher finds that in their classroom that having their own personal phone is being abused, would it be appropriate for them to say, well, here's a basket and you put all your phones in it at the beginning of the class and you can take them out when you leave?
I can tell you that happens now.
Okay,
No, that-
so it's appropriate.
It's more, the issue to me, no matter what district I've been in or those that I know of, it's the consistency with which we do it. So you cannot just have some teachers holding firm. You'll have, and I hate to pick on the math teachers, but they're great for when we say this is the policy, everybody puts their phone in and nobody thinks twice. I go in a math class, I put it in a little folder and you hold it onto it and I take it. But everyone has to do that to make it effective.
Are you thinking this is something you should have for school, school?
I think anywhere you go, if that's the policy, I'm just saying,
No,
I'm not suggesting. I'm just saying that if that's a policy, then we have to follow it, right?
but yeah, the math I think is particular. I have an app on my phone that somebody showed me. And it's an app that all you have to do is hold your phone over an arithmetic equation and it will solve it. Even if it's handwritten. I'll show you that if you want to see it after the meeting, but it literally will solve any equation, even with multiple, variables. No, they've known about it because I think it was a kid that told us about it 8 years ago or 7 years ago when I put it on my phone. So I'm telling you, math, it's a particular problem, the use of technology, but obviously, I don't think there's any going back on this, but the question is, are parents just as overwhelmed? Is there support that they need in this area or help? Same with our teachers. How do we, sometimes a school policy can make it easier for the teachers to implement things like this. So that's something that will have to be looked at. But I mean, the whole idea is we're trying to educate these kids and hopefully they're not going to be doing what I saw a couple doing in a 3-star Michelin restaurant, which they spent the whole meal looking at their phones and missing the wonderful, $2,000 dinner sitting in front of them and the experience of it. It's just, I don't get it, but that's what it is. That's the world we inhabit.
But your policy does help teachers not, where they cannot use devices unless the teacher or the administrator says so. It does state that very explicitly, so that's a good,
Yeah,
gives a lot of leeway.
okay, is there any further discussion or items on this policy? Okay, all those in favor, is there a motion? I think I need a motion to adopt the proposed policy 8131.81 on, use of private technology devices by students. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded, discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? All those abstaining? Okay, that's unanimously adopted. We will move on to the next policy, 6141.321. This is students' use of district computer systems and internet safety. This one similarly got updated by adding smartwatches and changing the reference of the district to the Region 12 schools as the district. There's also, attached to it is an acknowledgement. And that acknowledgement form was the source of a problem we had earlier in the year. If it wasn't last year or this year, I think it was last year, where we actually had we sent this policy out, and normally we would ask them to do what this acknowledgement says. Acknowledge that the policy exists and you understand you have to comply with it and that kind of thing. Instead, we had an older form of the acknowledgement sent out with the policy that asked them to indemnify and hold us harmless from any damages that result from, it caused some parents to say, are you out of your mind? There's no way I'm signing this. And they were right. We attached an old form. This is the right form. So we have now attached the correct form to the policy, and that should not be an issue in the future. But in any event, modest changes to this policy, and we got it right on the acknowledgement. So that's excellent. Okay, is there a motion to approve this proposed 6141.321 for first reading? Is there a second? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. All those abstaining. Okay, that policy is adopted for a first reading. Okay, the last policy is bylaw 9121, quorum and voting procedures. You will note that this interestingly came up at the last election of officers in July. And that is what happens when there is a tie. And where's why don't I have one that's marked? Thank you. On the bottom of the first page, oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't read it. Okay. On the bottom of the first page, it talks about what happens in the tie, and it says, in the case of a tie vote in the balloting for any officer, such tie shall be broken by lot. You understand what lots are. You're going to have two people, they're tied. You're going to have two straws. One of them's going to get cut shorter than the other. They're going to be held so you can't tell which one is short. Someone will draw a lot, and there'll be a decision made before they draw whether the short lot gets elected or the short lot goes home. And that's sort of, normally the short lot goes home and the long lot gets elected. It's the prejudice against height. But in any event, that is you could say, why are we doing that? And the answer is General Statute 10-46 says, in the case of a tie vote in the balloting for any officer, and this is in a regional school district, such tie shall be broke by lot. Stupid rule. And that's what the statute says. And the reason for that, I believe, is because, well, it's interesting because in a town, if it's a town school system, the tie gets broken by the town's legislative body if the tie exists for 30 days. So they give the board a chance to break the tie by continuing to vote. And if in 30 days they can't break the tie, then the town's legislative body will do it. Well, the town's legislative body for a regional school district is the Board of Education. So if the board can't agree and there's a tie, we can't break the tie. If we could break the tie, we would have broken it. Why they don't give us the same 30-day courtesy is beyond me. But what they say is if you can't break if there's a tie, it'll be broke by lot. Now, the question you're going to ask is, how do we determine who gets to pick the first lot? And there are three alternatives. The two people could beat each other with clubs until one of them's dead and the other one's right. I don't think that's the way we want to do it. Another method would be to have a 3-round or 5-round rock, paper, scissors, because that way both parties can equally be enthusiastic about casting their vote. And then the other way is to flip a coin, I suppose. But nonetheless, if we get to it, we will figure out a way to decide if there's a dispute over who gets to pick first. We will figure out a way to break that dispute tie. This is crazy land, folks, but it happened to us not a year ago, so we're amending this to bring it in compliance with the statute. So, does anyone, want to make a motion to approve the changes to bylaw 9121? Is there a second? All right, further discussion? If anyone wants a copy, I have a copy of General Statute 10-46 with the section highlighted if you want to see it. That right up there. Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, say nay. All those abstaining, please so indicate. I voted aye. It's unanimously adopted. If there is no objection, we can consider this meeting adjourned by consent at 8:17 PM.
Just a quick
Yep,
question.
question.
I'm looking at the upcoming meetings. We've got a finance and operations at the central office at 4 o'clock. And then the long range planning here at 6 o'clock. Do we want to have them both the same place? I thought we did too, but it doesn't say it,
Have it at the same place,
but where's the place? Okay,
but I don't know, we can.
Yeah, we could, I mean,
well, can we do it 4 o'clock here or there's still gonna be lots of kids running around?
no, we can,
There are two meetings back to back. And they're at different places.
You might have some,
that's it, move that here.
Both here? Okay. Okay, so I'll take CO out and put SVS.
We'll find a spot.
Good.
and you're still going to keep the CO for the June 3rd meeting. 'Cause there's no other meeting after it until 7 o'clock.
Right.
All right, anything else?
Well, we may change that one too, make it later and here, but we'll
Okay.
do that later.
All right, if there's nothing further and no objection, we'll consider this meeting adjourned by consent at 8:18 PM. Thank you all very much.